Hello and welcome to today's forecasting sheet, which is where we're going to be looking at how to analyse HMOs. So this is houses of multiple occupation. This is effectively where you're going to be buying a property and renting out the individual rooms. Now, if this is the first sheet you're going to be looking at, it's important to consider really how this sheet is kind of made up. The best way to do that is if you look at the buy to let forecasting video. That gives you all the context as to how these sheets kind of work. You can see here we've got a couple of different columns. We've got the rentals, the flip, so your plan A, your plan B, and your stamp duty land tax as well. Now what we'll look at here is really the main column here, this possible case scenario. You also have a worst case and a best case column that you can play around with and change figures on, and just really to assess how the deal might look if you were to change the purchase price or change your refurbishment costs, so you can understand that what sort of thresholds that deal starts to really make sense or unfortunately may not really work. Now this sheet has some extra detail on there than some of the other forecasting sheets. So it has more detail specifically around the rental aspects than the buy-to-let sheets because there's more things to consider, and has different detail in there than the buy, refurbish and resell sheets. Again, has slightly different context, slightly different information, slightly different figures that you want to take into account. So starting at the top and moving our way down, we look at still the property purchase first. So how much we're buying this property for, what the purchasing costs are going to be, what the refurbishment costs are going to be, and then we've got an idea of the total investment cost for this project. So we're going to be looking at a HMO specifically, £200,000 purchase price in this use case, stamp duty, automatically calculated here from stamp duty land tax column. That takes into account your 3% premium and also takes into account your traditional land tax, your stamp duty. Important thing to note here, some HMOs are great to buy maybe commercial properties to convert into HMOs. If you were doing that, then your stamp duty is going to be slightly different. So below this video, I'll put in a link to the government website to give you an idea of what sort of land tax, stamp duty you should be paying for commercial properties. Generally, for these sort of values of properties, it'll work out slightly less. Doesn't mean that should be your main criteria for buying a commercial to convert to a HMO. There's other things to consider, but certainly if you're buying a commercial to convert to a HMO rather than buying a residential to convert to a HMO, there are some slight benefits with that, with stamp duty. Currently anyway. So next we look at the additional fees. So maybe you're paying sourcing fees on this project. Maybe there's some legal costs of about £1,000. These are all about right. Sourcing fees, that's quite low. So we could say, okay, well maybe the sourcing fee is about £3,500, £35,000, and let's say £4,000 just to be safe. No auction fees. Surveyor's fees is high at £3,000, so we can reduce that and say, okay, well in this example, maybe it's a commercial survey, so it could still be higher than a residential survey. But residential survey probably about £350 upwards. Slightly lower if it's just a valuation survey and you're getting it directly. So say £350 will give us a good guide. Mortgage setup, we'll leave that at zero for now, and that gives us an idea of our purchasing costs. So we've got £200,000 property. That's going to cost us about £12,000 in additional fees to purchase. That's made up of a bulk of this is stamp duty, but there are other costs you can see here that make that cost up as well. Okay, refurbishment contingency. We're going to be looking at three costs here: refurbishment, contingency, refurbishment management, refurbishment costs. So this is on this current kind of forecast. Let's assume it's maybe a 6-bedroom HMO, and that 6-bedroom HMO is going to cost us about £10,000 per room to convert. So let's say about 60 grand for your refurb. That's a good kind of rule of thumb to look at. You can certainly do refurbs way lower than that, especially if you're not adding on suites. But if you're looking to go kind of back to brick and give it a very good kind of makeover, not doing extensions or anything like that, you're just using the existing layout but making a very high-end refurb, that should give you a good guide as to what that should come in at. Refurbishment management, if you're using a project manager, it might be good to put in a fee here. That could be 10%, up to about 15%, maybe 20%, depending on the skill set and the level of work that project manager is doing. Let's say we're not using a project manager on this project. Contingency, we're happy with 10%, and refurb, we're happy as a 60,000. Next up, furniture package. Now this is where I'd use this note section or comment section here on the right hand side. Furniture package, what we typically budget for deals is about £500 per room, so per bedroom, and about £1,000 for the communal area. Now there will be slight changes to that. So if it's a very large HMO, you'll get economies of scale. That might bring it down slightly per room. If it's a very small HMO, 3-bedroom, you might not need a large budget for the communal area. It might just be a small communal area. So just understand really the context of the deal that you're considering. For this particular project, if we're saying it's a 6-bed HMO, that'd be about £500 per room. So that's 3,000 plus 1,000 for the communal. So let's say about 4,000 in total for the furniture costs. So this HMO that we're looking at in this case study, 6 bedrooms, all in for about 282,000. That's purchasing, price, refurbishment, purchasing cost, and furniture package. Next up, we're going to be looking at financing. So as we have assessed in some of the other forecasting sheets, so the buy, refurbish and sell and buy, refurbish and financing strategies, buy, refurbish and sell also known as flipping, we've looked at saying that we're going to be funding the full project. That's important because you may be putting some money in the deal, you may be buying the property 100% cash. You may also be buying the property 100% financing if you're using private lenders. But if you don't assess the total amount of money that's going into the deal and assigning some level of cost to that, it's hard to really compare like for like deals. This just allows us to keep the sheet simple, it allows us to keep the assessing of the deals simple, while still having a true idea of what the cost should be. So that's why we look at 100% financing here, rather than say 50% or 70%, for example, because the opportunity cost of using your own money effectively. Next, month's holdings. So we're saying that this could be, let's say it's a 6-month project, and you can say here per annum for your cost of funds or per month. That will automatically calculate. So anything in these black border columns or cells, sorry, will be an automated calculation. So let's say it's 12% per annum, 1% per month, and we're doing a 6-month project. You can see here how that affects our finance cost and what our total investment in this project is going to be. So just under 300,000 in this example. Next up, we've got the amount of bedrooms. So let's say it's a 6-bedroom property, and let's just keep this information in here for now, simplicity. So 3 of those bedrooms are going to be extra large doubles. 3 of them are going to be just traditional large doubles, and then 4 of those properties are going to be en suites, and 2 of them are going to be sharing, let's say, a main bathroom together. So let's delete these figures. And let's assume a rental income of about £115 per week for the doubles with en suites, £110 per week for the large doubles with en suite, and £100 just for the large doubles, no en suite. Just put in here per week rent. As you can scroll down, now this starts to give us a target and a value really for this particular project. We can start to see how it starts to shape up effectively. So gross monthly rental income. This assumes 100% occupancy right now. This calculation is made up here of cells C37 and cell C45. So effectively these cells here. Total rental income per room for the whole property. Times by 52 weeks, divided by 12 months, that gives us our monthly rental income. Next, we want to assess that based on an occupancy rate. So let's say our occupancy rate for the year is about 95%. Now that's not too bad. It's probably looking at about 2 weeks of the year that aren't occupied. So 2 weeks of the year void, let's say, per room. So 95% occupancy across the property. That'll then give us a gross rental yield for the property, and also a gross rental income across the property based on the occupancy rate. So income, yield, you can see how that starts to change. So if we were to say that it's only 90% occupancy, so maybe a whole month or 4 weeks of the year are unoccupied, you can see how that starts to impact, or even less, the figures. Take it back up to 95%. What we have here is 100% occupancy, the gross rental amounts, gross rental percentage, 95% occupancy, gross rental amount, gross rental percentage. Next up, management fees. This is going to be variable depending on where you're on the country. Typically, HMO properties are higher management costs than straightforward vanilla buy-to-lets. 12% to 15% is probably the barometer you're going to be looking at in lots of areas. The areas that we cover, it's usually about 12%. And then on top of that, you have VAT for most of those agencies. And you can see here what that looks like from a total management fee perspective. What we then start to look at is the rental yield as a gross figure minus the management costs. So when we take into account occupancy rate, when we take into account management fees, you can see here it's dropped from about 11.36 to about 9.24. So just over about 2% spread so far in those costs. Next up, we've got the running costs. So electricity, gas, water, broadband, council tax, insurance, gas safety, cleaner, maintenance. All of these things are going to be a cost for you as a landlord when it comes to running a HMO. These are going to be slightly different than running a buy-to-let. That's why we don't have these columns in the buy-to-let forecasting sheet, because it kind of overcomplicates it slightly. They're not figures that are going to be required for most buy-to-lets. So specifically for HMO now, we're on a 6-bedroom property. So our electricity, our gas should be cheaper than this. Let's take it down to about £10 per room per month. Water, again, that should be slightly cheaper than that. Let's take it down to about 40. Broadband, still need decent broadband, so we could probably, let's say, about 40 for that. Council tax is obviously going to be variable depending on the property. There's other considerations to consider with council tax. Some councils are banding rooms individually, so it's important to understand that if you're paying that as a landlord or if the tenants are going to be paying that. So if you're not sure and you are looking to do HMOs, make sure you check your area, make sure you check the council tax banding to get an understanding of how that could impact your forecasting. Let's say on this property it's about £100 per month council tax. Insurance, let's say about £350 or about £35, sorry, per month. Oops. Gas safety certificate, £7 a month, so one gas safety certificate per year should cover that. Cleaner, and that's for the whole property. Cleaner, £100 per month. Communal areas typically is what we're going to be cleaning. So we can probably bring that down to about £80 per month for a 6-bedroom property, maybe even slightly lower. Maintenance costs, brand new property, just gone through a £60,000 refurbishment, shouldn't be needing £75 a month maintenance, but you will have wear and tear on the property, you will have wear and tear on the items, so we could probably bring that down to about maybe £50. Especially for a brand new property just having a refurbishment. That just gives you some budget going forward really to cover different costs of the property. So now you can see here the total running costs have been factored in, and then how that looks from a net rental income perspective. So your total income minus your management minus your running costs also is minus your anticipated occupancy rate, so it's not 100% dependent on occupancy. And that'll give you here your true net yield. So that starts to give you really a flavour as to what this particular deal looks like. Now there's a couple of things to consider here that are important for when you're assessing HMOs. With this forecasting sheet, it's great to try and use this previewing if you can, because then you can really shortlist properties a lot quicker. You can save time from without having to view properties that really just aren't going to work. You can make sure you're viewing the right properties before you even go out there to have a look at them, by making sure the figures kind of start to make sense. To do that, you really want to have a guide as to what your gross rental occupancy targets should be. Now, personally, we try and target about 12% plus from a gross rental yield perspective for a very premium, high value area. We're based in the Northwest in Manchester, and we typically cover majority of the Northwest for our HMOs, although we do look at property sales across the whole of the UK, and we do sell HMOs across the whole of the UK. Primarily the ones that we're assessing for our own projects are about 12% plus. In prime areas, and about 15% or so, give or take, in not low value areas, but kind of secondary areas, let's say. So instead of the prime city areas, probably more larger town locations. With that in mind, if this was a deal that we were considering and we thought, okay, we could buy it for 200,000, refurb is going to cost us 60,000 to get a 6-bed HMO, and this is the room rates we would get, we would know automatically that this yield is probably too low. Even a prime area, this yield wouldn't work for us. So we can then start to either make some decisions. Do we discount this property, or are we being a bit too generous or not generous on some of the, bit too harsh on some of the calculations? So for example, maybe we can buy it better than 200. Maybe you can buy it for 180. How does that start to look? Maybe we're sourcing the property ourselves. There's no sourcing fee. And the refurbishment, probably about right, so we'll keep that as it is. You can see how this has impacted the total investment cost now. So we're down to about 270. By keeping the rents exactly the same, that has now brought it into a yield of potential workability, let's say, for a prime area for us. However, if it was a slightly different opportunity, let's say it was maybe a town, a high value, good quality town location. Let's say it was purchase price still the same, 180. Sourcing fees we had still 4,000. So you can see it's gone up slightly here, but our room rates are slightly maybe better than what we're currently showcasing here. So not because town city or anything like that, just because on this example, maybe we're a bit harsh on the cost or the rental income for the deals, for the rooms. So let's say we could get maybe 120. So only about a £5 increase on each of the rooms. So let's move this to 115 and these to 105. You can see how that starts to impact the gross rental yield now and start to kind of change the dynamic of the deal slightly. Let's say if it's a £10 per week, increase. So by increasing the rents only by about £10, so just less than 10% per room that we've increased it, our gross rental yield jumps up quite healthily. Let's say also we can buy this property for way better. This is where you can start to see which figures really have the biggest impact. Room rates do make a difference, but by a marginal amount, but it does make a difference. Let's say we can buy it for about 150 instead of 180. And let's say the refurbishment, we can still do a decent refurbishment, but instead of 60 grand, we're only going to spend 50 grand. So we're now in it for 232. Room rates stay the same. You can see here how this has really impacted our gross rental yield. So the main changes that we made there, rental income did impact it by 1% or 2. Biggest change really is the purchase price and the rental, and the refurbishment cost. So our total invested in the deal has really changed that dynamic for our gross rental income. That then has delivered way better on our true net yield percent down here. So play around with the calculations, really understand what that project is going to look like from a running cost perspective. Obviously you can tweak the fees, you can tweak your occupancy rate, you can tweak your running costs, everything to try and start to see what that deal looks like. Give yourself a guide, understand where your net rental income, maybe it could be £1,000 per month, £500 per month, £2,000 per month, whatever that target might be, and or maybe it's a yield percentage. So maybe you're looking for 10% plus net. Whatever that figure is, just gives you a bit of an idea as to where to start to look on that deal, so you can compare it like for like and ultimately see if that deal really does work before you physically even go out to view it. Hope that makes sense. And that's really how we would forecast any given kind of HMO. Any questions, as always, don't hesitate to ask, and look forward to catching up with you on the next video. All the best.